it became evident that at Dixon Valve and Coupling Company, we were having a difficult time recruiting folks at the higher level, say people like 40 to 50 years old, 35 to 50 years old, that had children still in the school system. We had a hard time bringing them in if they weren't already part of the county. They would tell us, though, they weren't interested, and they wouldn't always tell you the exact reason, but when you really pressed them, they were concerned about our educational system. And that concerned us. We also were having, they need to know that our company is committed to education and works a lot with the school system, tries to work with mentoring programs and shadowing programs and such. And we were hearing things about the schools that we'd say, you know, here's our, we can't solve that, but we can suggest you talk to certain people in the school system, who in most cases were very helpful in that. But there was a general feeling that are our kids really getting all they should in Kent County? So the idea sort of sprang to the mind here that we would get the three largest employers together, private employers, which is Washington College, the hospital, and Dixon. And we sat down, Jim Ross, Mitchell Reese and myself sat down in a room, and we talked for, I guess, an hour or so. And we started sharing experiences, the one I just relayed about how do you get people, what are you seeing? And it was a strong common thread, what was happening. The hospital was getting a lot of criticism. I've gotten some criticism about different departments closing down. The fact is the hospital was having a hard time getting docs to come over here and live in Kent County. They couldn't do it. They wouldn't move. They had some more complicating things, and we all have these complicating, like spouses, where would spouses work? But one of the main reasons what was happening was they didn't want their kids in our school system, which is really sad. You talk to Mitchell Reese, and he would reiterate this, I'm sure. Most of the professors that choose to come to Washington College to teach live in Queen Anne's County. They don't commute over because Queen Anne's County is in the top 5 school systems in Maryland, and we're in the bottom 5. So, and you look at the statistics, and you can't blame the people for making those decisions. But do we just sit back as the 3 largest employers? Do we have any, and clout's not the right word, but influence on this base of maybe 1,000, 1,200 employees within our employee group that we can try to work on some of the cultural issues? Because all these problems don't stem from what's happening in the classroom. A lot of them stem from what's happening in our society and in our county with parents and brothers and sisters and such. So we looked at this thing a little bit differently, and I'll go through our thought process and how we got to where we are today. We needed a name for our group, and we thought around, we got other people involved in our different organizations, and Kent Forward sort of jumped up, and maybe that would be a good name, but it wasn't tied directly to education, because we think this situation we're working on, Kent Forward, includes a lot more than just the educational system. We believe that the educational system is part of the whole community, but we're not, sometimes don't act that way. We act like if it's a separate entity, and we have to find ways to work together to make it better for all of us. So exactly what is our challenge, and we look at the exact challenge, and what we came up with to enhance the educational, economic, and social well-being of Kent County. We didn't isolate just education because they're all interlocked. Every one of those things fits together. If we try to look at this thing, a committee to work on this and committee to work on this, we're not going to get what we think this Kent Forward, the group. And right now, Kent Forward is explained. It's just a coalition right now of these 3 large employers with a lot of input from other folks. But we sort of said, let's cut through a lot of these committee things to just get to the meat of what we can change and what we can help change. So that's where we're in. And we said, what's our goal? Well, our goal is in the next 5 years be one of the top 5 school systems in Maryland. Wow, we're going to go from a bottom 5 to a top 5. What you hear was all the reasons why that's not going to be possible. We heard that from a lot of people. We have an epidemic of low expectations in this county. We have an epidemic of businesses not thinking that we can do as good as we can. We have an epidemic of parents and a lot of kids, not everybody, but we have way too many thinking that. You know, a lot of the things we compared ourselves for was an average. You know, why would you want to be an average hardware store? Why would you want to be an average manufacturer, an average college? You don't. You want to be as good as the best. So therefore, our challenge in this county, as we see it, this coalition of Kent Forward, is to be in the top 5 in 5 years. Now, what we did is we had a lot of people that I personally talked to and our group talked to, and we put in thousands of hours, by the way, folks, and I appreciate what the college and the hospital has done to help enhance what we did at Dixon. But we talked to an awful lot of people to make sure that we were on the right track, to make sure the numbers we were looking at, you know, made sense and were presented in a way that was not pointing at any one group of folks in the county, but pointing at us all how we have failed to do some of the things that we should do. Some of the people we've talked to, you know, Brian Kirby and Brian Williams, the past and the present head of the school board, we talk to each other every week or every 2 weeks at the most. let them know where we were and what we were trying to do. Because some of the things that I think we were trying to do and point out, we're using strategic planning processes that business have to use, looking at benchmarks for success, and were we looking at the right things? And we sort of think maybe we weren't looking at all the right measurements in the right way. This group has no intention of being a shadow school board or being dictating how a school should run, but we have some methods through planning and vision that we have found leads to success if you stick with them. And that's sort of what we're trying to bring to this table, trying to bring maybe a different way to look at the situation we have now. From our standpoint, there was really no clear, understandable benchmarks that were transferred throughout the whole system, from the school system to the school board to the public to the parents. We didn't see, as part of the way we look at business, that little sucker keeps getting me. As we've looked at these benchmarks, we all have to look at the same benchmarks and how we kind of judge success. You know, how do we judge that success? Well, what does it really mean to be successful? And are we looking at the same measurements every year to see if we're improving? These things are really important, and I think we can get a lot better, and we can share ideas how to do that with the system that the businesses can. The business community was generally disconnected with the school system. I don't know if it's from neglect we weren't involved enough, or we have tried to be in our company, but we're in a little different position because we have a lot of folks that can actually work with the people in the schools, but we all have to find ways to become involved in the system, and there are ways to do that. And we're going to maybe hit on a couple of those things before this morning is out. Communications, I think the communications have to improve a lot, and any good organization has to have good communication. You need good communication skills, and you need good people know how to communicate and what to communicate. With good benchmarks, how do we communicate them? And then how do we all hold each other accountable for our responsibility in that area? And this next one is one that I think it can't be neglected, but it is not an observation. This is a fact that we have, I believe it's 52% free and reduced meals in King County. That's a signal of the poverty level of the county versus, and every county has a percentage of which they're providing. We're at 52%. Most of the schools in the bottom tier, all the schools in the bottom tier, have higher levels of free and reduced meals than the ones at the top. But there are a lot of schools in the system in between the bottom 5 and the top 5 that have numbers similar to ours that are higher than ours. So that is an observation, but isn't that a great challenge? Isn't it a great challenge with 7 schools that we can turn this thing around in less than 5 years, hopefully? We're educating every kid. We're educating that kid whose parents maybe didn't graduate from high school so they can go to college or they can go to community college. That's what our challenge is, not use the excuses, understanding that that's a problem, but not using that as an excuse on why we can't get as good as we can get. That really blows my mind, because that's what really making a difference is. Taking a huge challenge, and that number is a huge challenge for us to get through to all the parents and guardians and those kids. So what do we do? How do we get to all this stuff? These are observations. This is the action. What do we do? Well, we're kind of set, and we're kind of have understandable goals. I'm not going to pass this out because this is not ready for prime time yet. But there's 7 measurements here. Now, we've talked to the school board about these measurements. We talked to a lot of the folks in the state. These measurements are doable. Should we work on these measurements? If we start seeing progress in these, what's going to happen? Well, if we start seeing the kind of progress in the goals we've set on these, and these goals can be changed by the school board. Nobody's saying that this is exactly where it should be. We think it's close, somewhere we think we all want it to be together. But you look at each one of these things. Each one depends on the one getting better. Just going up, talk about attendance, grade level reading. You talk about math, PSATs, AP tests. So this is pretty simple. If every year we in the community and the parents saw we were going on these 7, and maybe the school board said there should be 9, or maybe they said there should only be 6. I don't care. All I'm going to say, there has to be some measurable, understandable goals that everybody in the community understands where they're going to go. In our company, we stop all work 4 times a year. 4 times we stop all work in all our organizations, and we spend a half hour to 45 minutes 4 times a year talking about how we're doing in our business and how we can get better. What should we keep doing, stop doing, and start doing? And it doesn't matter whether you're somebody's been there 2 weeks. If they have a better idea than somebody's been there 20 years, we want to listen to it. But the fact of the matter is, you have to have measurables you're going to in goals if you're going to get better. So we took that benchmark deal and we said, what is the most important thing that we can affect? Well, perhaps that is attendance. The very bottom line of this, and we just highlighted these 2 of the 7, absent fewer than 5 days per school year. We have a situation now in our school system where, let me pull this out. 72% of our students are absent more than 5 days a year. 23.5% of Kent County high school students are absent more than 20 days a year. That's a month. Now, is that Tracy's fault? No, that's not her fault. I mean, part of her responsibility is making the environment where kids want to learn, should learn, and she's working really hard to do that. But the community, the parents, aren't sending their kids to school. So these kids walk in after missing 2 or 3 days this month, or this week, and 2 days next week, and the teachers are then trying to teach the whole class, and these guys are behind, so they spend time going back to... I mean, it's just a catch-22 unless the community and we work really hard to put pressure on all our employees to make sure your kids are going to school. 53% of first graders are not reading at grade level. Now, how they kind of learn going up. It gets a little better in 8th grade, but still at 8th grade, it's 23% of the kids aren't reading at grade level in 8th grade. Now, once again, we dump these kids into the high school, or the elementary school dumps them into the middle school, and they're not prepared to learn at the levels that we need learning to get higher MSA scores, Maryland State Assessment scores, and high school assessment scores. But these two things, we, the business community and the parents, can absolutely, positively get behind and talk to our parents about it. Well, like I said, we have about 1,000, 1,200 employees between the three of us, and we've talked to the county, and they're willing to figure out how to do this. Now, this is going to be difficult. What we're proposing people do, and we have these, Marianne, we have these for everybody if they want to see what we did at Dixon here the last 2 weeks. These are the facts, and we didn't just hand this to people. We talked about these facts and the responsibility of those parents and our employee to make sure the kids go to school. We also talked to them about things to hear about, about the lateness and things like that, and what they're responsible to do. And we also talk about getting kids to bed early. I asked the kids in my 4th grade class what time they go to bed. Most of them go to bed between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. These are things that maybe these parents don't know. Maybe they don't. Let's give them the benefit of that. We have folks here that maybe didn't have the same advantage that a lot of folks in this room had on education and understanding what you have to be to be a good parent. But let's tell them through the businesses. Let's be kind about it. But let's us get involved in helping change this culture. We need to get a lot better. We're going to find ways in Kent Forward to get this information out through the Chamber of Commerce and other means to you folks. And I encourage you, please, talk to your employees. Don't hand them a piece of paper. Don't think it's not important. And talk to them regularly. We've had offers of help from Washington College, from Dr. Viniar, from Chesapeake College. There's so many opportunities we have in this county to make this the best school system in the state. We can do that. It's going to be difficult. But sometimes difficult challenges are more rewarding when they finally come to fruition. So this is really cool stuff.